Let me get started with the ongoing tensions between the U.S. and China as we continue to see this escalation with President Trump announcing more tariffs on top of China's retaliatory tariffs. What will be the impact of this latest escalation?
Look, it's very concerning, not least to the other members of the G7 that had hoped to convince Trump to take a more rules-based approach towards engaging and confronting China. The G7 shares the U.S.'s concerns about the free market access in China, the role of SOEs, even intellectual property theft, but they want a very different approach from the US, and they think that a generalized escalating trade war is not the way to go about it, particularly when the G7 is teetering on the edge of a recession. And so it doesn't appear as if that Trump has come any closer to changing his mind on China. If anything, he's become more bullish with the idea that he may even invoke a special act called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which would see him threaten to take out whatever U.S. businesses are in China. So this is really decoupling max, the worst case scenario. And it doesn't appear as if the G7 has in any way, shape or form changed the substance or nature of the US trade war, which is now becoming a global trade war.
As we continue to see this escalation between the U.S. and China trade tensions, we are now expecting the G7 to not release a joint communique, with President Macron saying that no one actually reads the communiques, that in recent times you read the communiques only to find disagreements. What do you make of this latest development? Because even if there would have been no real consensus, the whole point of going to these conferences, global conferences, was for leaders to try to find some common ground. Now they're actually giving up on the whole process itself.
No, I agree. It's a concerning precedent, but Macron had very little choice. The G7 used to be a family of values. These were the most advanced, economically advanced democracies in the world. It was meant to be a coming together of people, of like-minded partners who saw the world in the same way and came up with formulated policy responses. Now it has actually become a bit of a Tower of Babel with mutual incomprehension by every one of these leaders, not just Trump and the Europeans, but Boris Johnson and Brussels, the Italians and the French and the Germans. And so there's very little really maneuvering ground for still striking a communique. A communique has more potential to embarrass the leaders than it does to actually further the debate here. And so in some sense, Macron has actually managed, wisely, I think, to preemptively disarm Trump from being able to hijack this G7 in the way that he did Canada's G7 last year by refusing to sign on to a communique. He's gotten rid of the idea of a communique altogether. But what does it say about the state of affairs among what is meant to be the world's most powerful political alliance, the West? Well, it says that we're in very dire straits indeed.
Yeah, to your point about shared values, why would President Trump even suggest, for example, that Russia be admitted to the G7, making it the G8 again? It's pretty clear the other 6 nations would never support that. So what's the strategy behind that move?
Look, it was a non-starter from the beginning. Probably Trump knew that he would provoke his fellow members. He sees the G7 more as an open format for debate, not a coming together of like-minded partners. And so he doesn't see why Putin shouldn't be involved. But of course, the Europeans are sort of saying, look, if you want us to take China seriously, you're going to have to take Russia seriously. We're going to have to come up with a collective response as the Western political alliance on coming up with a sort of a more strategic, more coherent vision for how you engage both Russia and China. And obviously you can't have Russia at the table if the G7 is meant to be the vehicle for accomplishing that.